Hello, and welcome to another eBoost podcast. My name is Ryan Sigler, and I'm the Director of Paid Social Advertising here at eBoost.
Yep. And here's Chris. I lead the operations here at eBoost.
Yeah, and today we are going to talk to you about what strategies we use to increase customer lifetime value from leads acquired through digital advertising.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Exciting topic. We get a lot of clients who talk about this and find this very relevant, so we thought we'd bring it to you today. So,
Right.
Why don't we start off with Chris, from your perspective? Just kick it off. What are some ways you like to approach this subject?
Because first of all, I think this topic is quite interesting because a lot of times, as an agency that manages lead generation campaigns, we run ads to kind of bring in volume of leads, right? We focus on the conversions and what work, what kind of creative targeting criteria brings the right kind of lead. In the last recording, we did talk about a qualified lead or quality lead, how to kind of bring that in. But for services and products, right, the clients that run services like SaaS, like software as a service, or any kind of product that has some recurring subscription aspect of it, like diapers or something, or some kind of a food prep meal that always come to your door. So from that perspective, the first conversion point or any lead that you get as a trial to eventually pay, that initial point of conversion is not necessarily the first and last point of transaction point with your customers, right? So from that perspective, your actual cost per lead might be at certain dollars, but if that particular lead who became a customer spends more over the course of months, years, multiple years, your customer acquisition cost relative to the total lifetime value of a customer becomes better over time, right? Because if you acquire for a customer, hypothetically speaking, say $100, but if that particular customer ends up spending $10,000 with you, even though the $100 to acquire the lead sounds very expensive, $100, like, oh my God. But at the same time, if your business is able to kind of, make money out of this customer for like thousands of dollars, that $100 relative to the overall value is actually pretty sweet.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bad. So it varies by the business. Obviously, if you have a business that churns or people who spend once and never come back or cancels right away, then obviously you want a lower cost per lead, right? And so that's the kind of the picture of what we're talking about here, not just on the lead acquisition side, but okay, well, how do you get the right lead so they actually spend more a long time? Right? Of course, that has a lot of dependency on the clients from an agency's perspective, who needs to make sure they are running a good product and services. They have the right email programs, the right incentives. So as an agency, we're banking a lot on clients to kind of run their services well. But at the same time, there's a lot of things we could take advantage of, those data, those insights, tweaking the targeting, or apply those learnings back to how we acquire the lead. So that's what this, I think, episode is about, to kind of brainstorm and talk about the strategies and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think we have this conversation a lot with a lot of our clients, which is, everyone's looking for the lowest cost per lead and the highest lifetime value, right? That's the perfect world. But in reality, it's difficult to nail both of those right out of the gate. It's difficult to get an incredibly low cost per lead while at the same time getting leads that are of high enough quality to where not only will they make that purchase or become a lead right off the bat, but they'll also continue to drive that revenue, that lifetime value. And a lot of that lifetime value comes from nurturing them over a long period of time. In your example, Chris, like a subscription for like diapers or something like that, right? Like that's a pretty low cost item, which is it's easy to acquire that lead, generally speaking. The targeting is really strong on that, and the cost of acquisition shouldn't be too expensive because the product cost isn't that high. But for certain other types of SaaS programs or certain other types of products that have a high value, that lead nurturing is so important to not only capture that first sale or that first initial conversion point, but then also continuously have them come back again and again to make those purchases. There's a lot of other factors there also, such as like how fast, if it's a consumable, how quickly is it consumed? When can you retarget these people or re-engage them again? So there's a lot of other factors that come into play.
Mm-hmm. A lot of factors come into play, and there's this maybe one or two clients where I remember very clearly. I'm sure you remember this, but I think to acquire a lot of lead volume, I think they give out like Amazon gift cards.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then like on the surface, it sounds really good. It's like, holy shit, like, you know, like, wow, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I forget the amount, but it's like, let's say it was
like $100 gift card for anyone who would become a lead and book a call with them to hear their sales pitch. And sounds like I think from what I remember, like where you're going to go with this is they had a lot of leads, but I'll let you story.
They got the gift card and they didn't come back or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. They got a lot of leads and a lot of people who sat very quietly on those calls and said, "Thank you for the call. Where's my gift card?"
Right.
Had no actual interest in it. So to your point, Chris, I think it's sometimes with these incentives, it makes it really, really easy to get the leads. Are they the quality leads? Or are you just heavily incentivizing them to click the button?
So in that example, like let's just say we don't know the results yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is the ads that we create and help the clients kind of grow the lead volume. The ad's going to show the incentive, and when they come to the landing page, you're going to see the incentive, you know, and of course they're going to react to it, and the conversion is great. Lead is going to go up, and then the next question becomes, hey, they got all this meeting. And then, of course, some of them will churn, some may stay. Mm-hmm. But let's just say the result turned out pretty bad. Like most of them just got the credit or the card and then just left.
Yeah.
Right? So as an agency, what happened next is like, okay, let's run the campaign without the incentive and let's see how that goes. From that perspective, the data that we actually working with here is not just the advertising data, but also relying on the customer or our clients' CRM data, the sales kind of feedback, post lead, like what happened data, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So my question to you is like, what does a typical conversation look like from there, and what kind of adjustments are you making on the campaign side, right?
This actually goes back to our last podcast where we talked a lot about kind of using UTMs and post-click metrics to tie back into quality of those leads. And what it really comes down to is a couple of things. Number one, and first and foremost, is good communication with the client and making sure no amount of data makes up for communication with the client and having them specifically report back to you on how their sales team is handling these leads or how they're internally perceiving the quality of these leads. But beyond that, there's obviously just making sure you're using the right UTMs, making sure that everything's connected. Pretty much everything we talked about in our last podcast, which is connecting all the right data sources and trying to improve the best you can the feedback loop between whatever advertising platform you're on and whatever tracking software you have, and then ultimately whatever sales software you have, to try to improve that feedback loop to make sure that the actions that you're taking on the platform today were a representative of directions that past leads who previously had come in, a couple of weeks ago are actually the high quality leads. So like making sure that you're adjusting your ads and your campaigns today based on how quality leads came in from the past as opposed to just general lead volume overall. So you want to make sure your decision making, it's kind of like throwing a football. You want to make sure you're throwing it to where the receiver is going to be as opposed to where they are currently.
Yeah. You did mention about the feedback loop, getting more smarter about like what worked, what didn't, and applied it back to the campaign. But in this customer lifetime value perspective, right? Like, let's just say it was a quality lead that the client got through our ads, but there's some differences in people who stayed or not stayed or and spend money.
Yeah.
In that case, what sort of data will be helpful to kind of not only get the lead, but also kind of keep on spending? Like, is it some sort of a list of customers that you're going to use to upload to Meta or some sort of a LinkedIn to kind of go after that type of people, or is it more like adjusting the targeting criteria? Like, what kind of work goes into your campaign management work?
That's a great question. So typically what I recommend that all clients do is really focus on audience segmentation when they have all their purchasers, whether they be an e-commerce brand or lead gen, whatever it is. Really, it comes down to like audience segmentation. And what I mean by that is taking your full customer list and segmenting or organizing them in order of highest lifetime value, most spent with your company, to like least spent with your company. And talking about Meta in particular, they have a really cool feature there called lookalike audiences. I think a lot of people in advertising probably heard about lookalike audiences. A lot of platforms have them already.
Mm-hmm.
I've had them. But essentially, for the rundown, the quick idea behind lookalike audience is you upload a seed audience or a custom audience, and then you have Meta or any other platform go out and try to find you people who look like the kinds of people who are in your customer in the seed audience. So in this case, you could upload all of your customers from like Shopify, upload them all into Meta, and say, go out and find me 1%, 2%, 3% of the US population who have things in common with this core list. Meta will go through that list and try to find age, demographics, interests, geographic regions, whatever commonalities they have, and then go try to advertise your product to those kinds of people who are in your seed list. But what's really special about Meta is they have the ability to not treat everyone equally. This is where the segmentation comes in really important, or at least organization. Because instead of just uploading a generic list of everyone in your customer list, you can actually have Meta put more weight on the kinds of people who have spent more money with you over time. And you can break that out as opposed to in the form of spent more money in one-time purchase or spent more money over lifetime value. Have come back again and again and again to purchase. So if you use those LTV-based lookalike audiences and you have enough data to feed into them, they tend to perform really, really well. The one thing I'll make a note on those is make sure that you're excluding any commercial purchasers or people who will typically skew the data incorrectly. So if you're a B2C company, look out for anyone who's coming in and buying a pallet's worth of product from you at once. Remove those people off the top, because that's going to negative, because you'll have one or two people who've spent 10 times more than everyone else combined, and you don't want to skew the data towards those types of people. So just kind of clean up the audiences a little bit that way. But generally, that type of audience segmentation, really focusing on who your customers are and putting more weight on the ones that spend a lot of money with you, and then giving that data to Meta. In this case, Meta, LinkedIn, other platforms, that's very valuable. You can do that manually with other platforms, right? You can just upload certain segments to them, but Meta will let you upload everyone and just put more weight into them.
Right. That's really interesting. I think the same kind of process applies to Google as well. Because Google Ads
Sure
also
does.
have like a lookalike. It might have like extra features within Google Ads like that allows you to segmentation and integrated with Google Analytics and that sort of thing. But you mentioned segmentation, and that kind of reminded me too that from an analytics standpoint, right? There's really different ways to kind of approach segmentation as far as like using that data for better targeting or running the ads. One is like Google Analytics, typical tool that a lot of us will have access from the agency side. That's client enables us with. But that has a lot of good user behavior data. What page they looked at, where they come from, whether they went to the cart or not, or downloaded something. But a lot of times the Google Analytics don't have good customer information in there because of privacy reasons or limitations around the how it holds the data or whatever reason that is. So typically, the client would have a lot of rich data that in the CRM, customer relationship management softwares, databases. That's where they have like name, last name, email address, the industry, the people level data. But those people level data don't have what page they looked at, what ad they clicked on. So these data are kind of like siloed in many ways. So as an agency, as well as a client, a lot of times they're sitting on really wealth of data that's not heavily utilized for better kind of execution on the campaign side. What I mean by that is, if we could find people who actually spend more, has good customer lifetime value, that's relatively easy to get out of the CRM, because all you have to do is look at, the total revenue spent out of a customer, right? And compare that to people who spend less or churn, right? And give that list to Facebook or Meta, right? But what if you can actually segment that by people who came through ads versus organic search, or people who have visited the website multiple times or engaged? maybe there's some good data that indicates this lead shows very similar behavior to people who actually spent with us a lot, versus this type of people actually showing some behavior that's likely to churn faster.
Yeah.
Or so there's a lot of like good potential data in web analytics that CRM might not have that could be a lot beneficial when it's married together. So I think this is where more and more analytics tool is getting smarter with AI or machine learning, what have you. Good example is Google Analytics 4 has a what do you call ability. If you have a lot of conversion, whether it's like e-commerce purchase or I believe also leads, but when you have enough volume of conversion, like GA4 has a feature that activates who is likely to buy in the next 7 days, who is likely to churn in the next 7 days. And you can actually marry that segmentation with Google Ads, and Google Ads could optimize against that. Say, hey, go after the people who are likely to buy in the next 7 days. So I think there's like 7 different models, or I might be wrong, but there's 7 different kind of like choices, if you will. But it doesn't become activated until there's enough signal that activates this feature.
Yeah.
So I think tools are going to get more smarter about enabling that type of kind of integration and capabilities for segmentation. That's also taking into consideration of lifetime value.
Yeah.
So
that's
I think
a really good point.
That's one area that I'm looking out for.
Yeah, and that's really cool that that's kind of native within GA4. We have a couple of clients who use Klaviyo or Clavio. I don't really know how to say it. I don't know which is right, but whichever one's right. Maybe Klaviyo or someone who's listening can actually call us and tell us. But Klaviyo has a function like that in there as well. I can think of a couple clients who have kind of reached that threshold of enough sales where they actually get predictive analysis, and they're able to predict who's likely to churn, who's likely to reorder within the next 5 days, who's likely to reorder based on the next 30 days. And we'll actually take those audiences and sync them back over to Meta, sync them to other platforms, and advertise directly to those people. So kind of in this case, like just like you were saying, a tool is doing some of that segmentation, that audience segmentation for you, using its own machine learning and kind of like AI and magic behind the scenes to identify these people and put them into a list and sync those over. And then what I like to do is take that audience segmentation one step further within the platform. So I like to advertise directly to those people, because not all ads are going to say, you're not going to say the same thing you would say to acquire a customer. You're not going to use the same copy. You're not going to use the same creative, that same type of brand awareness as you are to re-engage a past customer. For those types of people, you might offer certain other types of incentives, like comeback specials, which we call them, typically like a coupon or a discount to have them come back, or a reminder that their consumable item that they purchased, they've likely, like for instance, we have like a pet industry client, right? And they have like a food where we know that the average time after post purchase, we know that the average time to reorder was within, I don't remember the exact date, but let's call it like 28 days later, they tend to reorder. So we have all those people in a specific audience, and we're targeting those people very specifically with reminders. So just like the client is sending out reminder emails to them, we're also sending out reminder kind of posts through Instagram and other platforms that they're on, advertising on, to remind these people and really just stay top of mind. Like, hey, my dog food might be getting low. It might be time to reorder. Oh, and did you know there happens to be free shipping this week? Or, oh, and did you know that there happens to be a 20% off coupon if you hit a certain threshold? And so that's kind of reinvigorating those people and really boosting that lifetime value for them.
That's very interesting. One last kind of like a topic that I also want to talk about in this segment is a lot of, maybe not so much nowadays, but I remember at one point a lot of B2B companies were kind of like a little bit reserved in spending money in digital advertising, because a lot of their business model was sales rep doing the cold calls, cold outreach, and then they were focused on marketing automation. But nowadays there are more B2B companies actually spending on like digital advertisement, right? But I also hear and see, I met a lot of companies who also don't know how to set cost per lead kind of goal. Like,
Yeah,
hey, what should my cost per lead be?
that's a very common question.
And I get that, but for companies who operated for a very long time, has a lot of good rich data, they a lot of times they have customer lifetime value. Like, oh, like this is how much my clients actually staying with us on average, 2 years, 3 years. This is how much they're spending. For maybe some industry, they might have product that's like in the thousands and some product in a couple hundreds. So it might vary by product segments too, but a lot of big, legit, like mature B2B companies will have good data around that, but they might not have good kind of historical learning and benchmarks around digital advertising performance data, right? So typically, what I kind of brainstorm with those type of prospects or clients is like, well, what is your customer lifetime value, and what is kind of like your break-even point? Like, taking into consideration how much you're making for this client, how much percent are you, after taking out the costs and all this stuff, like they might not share that, fine, but with that in mind, how much are you willing to spend more to acquire that customer? Right, let's just say 30%, like 15% to 30%. Oh, I could probably acquire that customer if it's like 10 to 30% of that lifetime value. Okay, great, then that should be your cost per lead, right? Or cost per MQL. And you might be surprised at what that number looks like depending on the lifetime value. The bigger the better, of course, but if it's a small number, then let's say, okay, well, let's try to achieve that cost per lead or cost per MQL and go after that. And over time, please, client, work on your customer lifetime value, or the optimize the churn and that sort of thing. And that's also going to help us work for the campaign at a higher cost per lead kind of thing, so that it gives us more bandwidth to kind of fail and try new things, that sort of thing. So that's another side of why this customer lifetime value is actually important, because it also kind of level set the expectation on the lead gen side.
Yeah. That's a really good point too. I think another factor too is churn, especially for consumable subscription based companies. It's just factoring in churn rate on like average churn rate for your customers. I think that's a huge factor in terms of like determining your cost per lead and cost of acquisition, really. Yeah, churn. Some people call it attrition rates, but that's another big factor too.
Yeah, for sure. Cool, man. As we wrap this up, is there any kind of like interesting that you wanted to share, or talk about, or bring up?
Speaking strictly from the marketing, from the advertising side of it all, I'll let you speak to the analytics side of it. I think it's most important, kind of like what I mentioned, is making sure your customer segmentation is on point for whatever advertising platform you're on. And I think that really building a loyalty program, really building people are so focused on a funnel. They talk about a funnel, and that funnel always leads to the point of conversion. People don't ever see the bottom half of that funnel, like the second half of that funnel. It's kind of like past the singularity point. What's that second half of how do you keep people not necessarily in your funnel, but how do you keep people kind of in there? I don't know if there's a better way of putting it, and how do you keep people coming back? And I think that's tailoring your ad copy, tailoring your presentation. People are so focused on their brand awareness, again, to like impress people, that they sometimes forget about what's their brand awareness for retention. Almost called like a brand retention. How do you stay top of mind? How do you make sure you're re-engaging your past clients, your past customers? And this goes for SaaS products. This goes for subscription, consumable. I think everyone can really benefit from this. But really focusing in on what's your messaging. How do you keep your clients happy? And there's different ways to do that, but a lot of times it's like loyalty. A lot of times too, there's almost like an affiliate model where you have your customers talk about you through their channels to their friends, and have like a referral network where they refer you and they get bonus points, or they get discounts, things like that. So I really challenge every like e-commerce brand out there, every kind of anyone who's focused on anything related to this, to really think through what's that post-purchase and what's that 1 month, 2 month, 3 month post-purchase person thinking about you as a brand, and how are they even remembering you?
That reminds me of one more point is the always get feedback from marketing ops or the sales op or rev ops, like people in operation basically, or what I mean, based on my experience, you'd be surprised how much you could learn from salespeople who knows the end client who actually bought the product and who stayed on, the so-called good customer. So a lot of times when you talk to salespeople, like, hey, who's your good customer? And a lot of times they'll tell you very different things from what marketing has on a landing page.
Yeah, very true. Yeah,
I might be wrong, but I've seen cases like that where it's a sales rep will be like, it's like, hey, dude, like actually, when we talk to these good customers, these are the problems they care about, and this is why they're actually buying the product, because this is exactly the feature they're actually looking for. So if we package what the features and what the end clients really want to solve for with what, just give it to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And same thing with marketing. When marketing will tell you what's a good lead or not. So, all these feedbacks a lot of times may not be in the data that you're tracking or recording in the CRM. So like, these feedbacks are actually really good insights you could get that we can actually repurpose in how we target and how we articulate in the ad copies and stuff.
I think that reminds me of the good old principle, Pareto's law or Pareto's principle, which is like 80% of your business comes from 20% of your target audience or 20% of your actual consumers, Right. And I think that you nailed it right on point. Just Meta might see, or these advertising platforms, even Google Analytics will see all leads, but not all leads are treated equally, and not all lifetime value is treated equally. And really communicating within your teams, having an open communication on what they're actually seeing, what your sales team is seeing versus what your marketing team is seeing versus what your analytics team is seeing. They might all be looking in different places when reality there's something in the middle there that's the actual value.
Yep. Yeah, this is good conversation. Let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, I'll give it to you.
Yeah. I mean, we talked a lot, but I think we did talk about the importance of customer lifetime value, how we derive the importance out of it, setting the customer conversion goal out of knowing this number. We did talk about the data, the difference between user behavior and the profile data from the CRM versus like web analytics, and how we could potentially use these insights. Sounds like you did talk about segmentation, the key importance of knowing your customers, the different kind of like, segmentation, and how to apply those learning back into, how you target, how you kind of, create the feedback loop and make your ad smarter from the copy and creative. And also beyond the funnel of not just conversion point, but beyond that, like, right. We also talk about the incentives, how incentives may not translate to a good customer that buys for a long time. So some of the caveats around that, as well as, some of the, getting the feedback from the operations, from the actual people who might have more data points that's not in your database. So we covered a lot here, but and
there's so much more to cover too. So much more to cover. We didn't even get into like landing page optimization, making sure the messaging is right on the landing page as opposed to advertising. But I think we gave enough information to give people an idea of what we do here at eBoost.
Yes, sir. Yep. And for those listening, please visit our website, eboostconsulting.com, and feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Feel free to leave any comments underneath the video, like and subscribe if you found any value at all in this conversation, and if you want to stay up to date with our next episode.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.